Hello and welcome to another episode of the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, as always, and I would like to switch up this intro a little bit. So instead of me always sharing a fun fact about myself or a project that I'm working on, if you're listening to this right now, shoot me a message by email or on a YouTube comment or in an Instagram DM, a fun fact about you or your career or project you're working on, and I'll include it in the intro next week. So if you're listening to this, send me a fun fact about yourself and I'll share it in the intro in next week's episode. So I hope this ends up being fun. And if I get a lot, I'll just keep putting them in. And if I only get one, then that person is going to get a whole bunch of attention, I guess. Anyways, also, if you're listening to this podcast and you'd like to support it, you can check out my Patreon. The link is in the bio. This chat is a little different than normal, and that's because it's with Adam Fuchs. And while he's been an animation director at Warner Brothers for the past decade and worked on projects like The Shivering Truth, Harvey Birdman Attorney at Law, and Aqua Teen Hunger Force, we're instead chatting about how he got into making indie music videos, which led to developing an app for creating super fast and easy 12-frame animation loops called PX12. So in our chat, he's going to share where he got his idea, how he teamed up with a genius coder, and how they developed the app together over the last year. So if you're thinking of making an animation app, you definitely want to listen to this episode. So without further adu, let's jump in. Hello, Adam. How are you doing?
Hey Terry, I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat, but I want to grill you first because you mentioned something to me just a few minutes ago that I didn't know about, but you studied under Richard Williams. Is that true?
Yeah, I had an opportunity to take his workshop class that he would do when he was live. He would do it like around the world, maybe two or three times from my understanding when he was doing it. And in 2001, he did it in Denmark. And the studio that I was working with were like, come on, you're going to come with us and we're going to go to Denmark and take this course with Richard Williams. And we did. It was amazing. It was the introduction to me understanding or me making sense of animation and a lot better than I had previously, and maybe realizing that maybe I could do this for a living. It gave me a little bit of confidence.
You were at a studio already
I was at a studio
as an animator.
Yeah, I got in. So we were doing. There's a lot. Okay, so there were a couple of studios, commercial houses around town. Cartoon Network had started here, and they were doing a lot of promos and IDs. And
What's here? Are you talking about Atlanta? Are you talking about
Atlanta?
LA?
Yeah, sorry. Atlanta, yeah. And I was in school for graphic design, and I had some friends, really just one friend that was doing it, and he kind of mentored me into telling me about animation, and I was fascinated with it. And I started going around asking for inking tests. And that was really how I got my foot in the door to one of the studios, was doing inking tests.
What's an inking test?
So they would take the raw and pencil animation and just ink over it with pen, make a clean line. So you would scan that drawing in and then use that as a clean line to color.
Right. So you were like a cleanup artist, I guess.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Because it's like, I guess with the other bigger movie studios, they were doing pencil cleanups, but with the Cartoon Network shows that were really big, the Powerpuff, the Dexter, Courage, and those shows, they were all like thick black lines. Right. So it just made sense to go buy a bunch of Micron pens and wear them out and ink these perfectly clean lines. So I got really lucky and just kept doing these tests around town, and eventually a studio, like there's not many people that were doing that, so there was comic artists doing cleanups as well. So that got my foot in the door.
Yeah.
And from there, I was kind of occasionally I would get a job where it was like, here, do this tween here and there, and I would kind of work with the director on that level. And then that ran its course, I think probably 6 to 8 months I was doing that freelancing and just kind of getting work where I could in that world, because I was working other jobs as well just to survive. And from there, I kind of landed with a studio that were um, these like just cool creative guys that were skaters and music heads, and I met a bunch of my lifelong friends there, and they went to Richard Williams. That was sort of like, you're going to come, you're perfect for this, you got to know who this guy is. And they all had talked about him at the studio, and I kind of known who he was just from there. But I didn't, growing up, I wasn't a big Disney buff, or like, I didn't really know many of the like popular animes, the Frank and Ollie and all that kind of stuff. I was really learning on the job. And my upbringing was like Saturday morning cartoons. That was my education in animation.
So you were a cleanup artist for 8 months. You found this new studio that was just some really chill dudes that you vibed with, and they were like, "Adam, we know you can ink, but we want to take you to the next level. We're gonna fly you to Denmark and study under one of the greatest animators of our time, and we'll go from there."
Yeah, the only thing is I flew myself. They didn't. I was one of
Oh,
their freelance artists. I think they paid for all the full-time people to go.
so they were just like, "You should go to this thing and pay for yourself."
Yeah. But I'm like super grateful that those guys did that, because it really did change the course for everything for me. It was, even though the course itself was a week long, it was like literally going to like a animation school for 4 years and wrapped up in 1 week.
Wow.
It felt just intense, like, and it gave me confidence that you can totally do this.
So
Like,
I'm assuming he took you from like the bouncing ball to the walk cycle to lectures to full character animation by the end.
yeah, he basically did his book before his book was out.
Ah,
So like, I don't even think, yeah, because the book had come out way later, and then he did the DVD set of his book,
yeah.
and it was pretty much that. It was
So I've watched those lectures and it was just kind of that.
yes,
Wow. But how do you, okay, so as somebody who doesn't, have traditional animation uh education like, CalArts or Sheridan at the time, which other people were getting, you take a week-long course. How do you translate what you learned from that into like actually, practice? Because it takes more than a week to, even get a ball bounce right and timing wise
right.
and figuring out the motion and everything. Uh, but you're saying it was just, he waved a magic wand and bam, here you are 20 years later.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like doing the work. Came back really inspired to kind of
Yeah,
just keep working at
I
it.
see.
I came in from a place where you're working with insanely talented draftsmen that they're just born with a pencil in their hand that can draw anything they want. And I guess I just didn't have that confidence in me early on. And I was intimidated. I was working around these incredibly talented people, and when I came back, I was really inspired, because you know it my mindset was like, just absorb everything you can and keep trying, keep making things, and hopefully you'll just get better and learn from them, and whatnot.
Wow. So now that you've had a full career in animation, do you wish you had gone to animation school, or, how you did it, which was learning on the job kind of, is that how you would have preferred looking back?
Yeah, I don't think I would have changed a thing,
Wow.
because it really is like me as a whole, like very do it yourself, self-taught
Hmm.
mentality. I think my childhood growing up a skater and into like punk rock and metal music and stuff like that, just it really just was going out there and just making something and learning on your own. And I think if I did it any other way, it would have I'm not sure I would have fallen in love with animation. Maybe, I don't know.
Hmm.
I when I was in school for design, it was, I think it did kind of come full circle for me, because I went through the doing my animation stuff with doing promos and pilots and shows and stuff, and eventually kind of going back to design, really loving the way you can make things look in animation and less about obsessing over movements and your traditional animation brain. I wanted to kind of really mess things up or do things a different way.
Interesting. So like maybe give me some highlights of your career since in animation specifically from that instigating moment.
Yeah, I think kind of piggybacking off that last thing, just to being sort of figuring out things my own way, that got me into making loving music, got me into making more music videos and doing that for many years. So I've worked with tons of fun and good artists, like Post Malone, worked with Zayn from One Direction. I've worked with Ghost. Let's see, I've worked with a bunch of indie artists as well throughout my career, and that kind of lumped me in to be able to do experimental animation
Yeah.
with music videos. And then I've done a ton of other stuff for Adult Swim. I'm an animation director at Adult Swim, so I've worked on really amazing shows and jobs there.
I have a friend actually right now who's trying to get more into music videos. How do you end up working with artists like Post Malone, where, the world is their oyster? They can go to anybody. How do they end up coming to Adam specifically? Do you have an agent?
So
Do you have, just a huge repertoire of work where you built up indie
that
artist over indie
was
artist?
that one was a unique scenario. That was like we at work we did a music festival every year. We still do a music festival every year, and this one year to promote the festival, we had the opportunity to make a music video for him.
Hmm.
So they were really looking to work with Adult Swim, and
I see. I see.
the director and I, because I did the animation direction on that one.
Got you.
And
So
but
it's more of a case of artists coming to Adult Swim saying, "We really love your work. You got a lot of crazy stuff," and then you being a director at Adult Swim saying, "Adam, we trust you with this project."
some cases yes, and some cases no, because I do a lot of artwork on the side as well, things that inspire me, keep me creatively I don't know what I'm saying.
Interested or motivated
Interested.
or
Yeah, thank
yeah.
you. So sometimes I'll have artists like, Zane, for instance. That was like one that was like, oh, we know you do animation. We like your animation and illustrations, and they would hit me up privately from that. But it
Nice.
really is just any way that it comes, I'm all for it. You know.
Cool, cool, cool. So
Yeah.
by day, you're an animation director. By night, you're an experimental music video coder. Should we start talking about the latest
Well,
thing?
yeah, okay. So I can't take any credit for the coding. That's my
I was
partner,
gonna
John.
ask you about that because, like, I have ideas of what I want to do with mobile games and stuff. Sorry, maybe I should just preface this with saying, Adam, you've launched an app for animators or animation called PX12, and I'm super curious to pick your brain about that. So, you, I don't even know where to start. So you have somebody that codes for you. You have a partner that you work with.
Yeah.
And how
So
did
I
you find this person? Like, how do you, sorry, I'm not just interrupting you. How do you find somebody, because this is essentially what I want to do. How do you find somebody that you trust enough to say, like, let's make an app that has no profit yet and may take a year or two to build, and you're going to do all the coding and I'm going to do the direction and art. Like, how do you find somebody that you can trust back and forth to do
it
something
was
like that?
it was hard. I won't lie, it was hard. I first reached out to some friends that had known people that code or would be interested in working on a project like that.
Yeah.
And you know, I would I found a couple people, but it always met with like it was more of a burden on them than like a true partnership.
Right.
Like I didn't want them to feel like I was just going to them to hire them to make this product. I wanted to feel like they were on board with me and their
Totally.
ideas mattered. So when I found John, John is he's really more of a technologist and a creative in my brain than just like a coder, even though that's like a brilliant coder. And he had already been making apps, and every once in a while, like on the app store, I would just search like animation app, and I would just deep dive into like MS Paint, and they would just be random taglines that I would try to queue up in the app store to see what would pull up if I just typed in 8-bit animation app or whatever. And his app, he had a couple apps at the time that were one was an emailing app, and another was just a really basic drawing app. And uh, he's going to kill me for forgetting the name of it. Did Oh, he's gonna kill me. Anyways,
It's all right.
I'm blanking on this drawing. I'm sorry, John. But he did this drawing app, right? And it was just weird enough that I was like, this is kind of interesting. There's things in it that related to the idea that I had. So
Hmm.
then from there, I just kind of found him online and watched all of his videos and thought, okay, he presents himself as a really cool guy, like an honest, genuine, cool person. And I just was like, one day I was like, hit him up. And he was in Mexico at the time. So it took him a couple of days to get back to me. And then he was like, yeah, I'd definitely be interested in this. And we met, and he was like, how did you find me? I think he was most shocked about that because not many people are probably searching the app store for like bizarro animation apps.
Right.
So I think that was a shock to him. But it took a while and we hit it off right away. It was like,
So what did you say to him? Like, hey, I stalked all your videos. I think you're a cool guy. You've done all the work already for these apps, but I have an idea that you're gonna want to jump on.
yeah, yeah. I think I did. I had done some sample test of like how I wanted the app to work. I kind of told them early on, backing up before I found him, I had started at the pandemic, I'd started thinking about using an app to perform that was like uh see if I can explain this. I was toying with apps that weren't meant to be really animation apps. They were just like drawing apps that you can do basic stuff with, but they had techniques in there where it was like, I'm sure you've seen some apps that are like live, like when you draw, it's like a living line. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that's really cool. You could create really fun, quick animations to maybe play music if you were going to go on to like, at the time we were all on COVID. So it was like, maybe you do a live stream on Instagram and you just have music playing or the record. And then the top screen can be you drawing to that record and create really fun stuff, because doing it traditionally is really boring. It takes a long time. If you're going to time lapse it, that's one thing, but if you were doing it in real time, it's kind of slow. So that was the initial thought, was like, it'd be really cool if you could do this live. So I started researching more apps and found a lot of old, like really an old technology, the old apps. A lot of the inspiration came from Commodore 64, which is I don't know if you were
I had
that.
a Commodore 64.
No way.
It was my first, well, it was my parents' computer, but it was the first computer I ever toyed with, I guess.
That's
Saying
awesome.
that, it actually, and like seeing, PX12, it actually reminded me a lot of like kid pics kind of stuff that I used to play like in grade
Yeah.
3 or 4, where you're just like having fun by yourself and creating cool visuals and like pixelated movement.
Yeah, a lot of so kid pics came. I was too old for that. Mine was Commodore 64. Even before that, it might have been like Apple II or whatever,
Right, right.
And the Commodore 64 was like, they made a ton of art apps in there, 3D apps, and one of their main like featured apps was Deluxe Paint. and they did like 8 or 12 versions of the app. And in that app, you could kind of create really busty animation, but you could also create like color cycles that were happening in real time, like really cool things that you wish you could record or capture in the app. Um, I don't know why they did it, but that over time, that technology kind of faded away. And then we're making stuff like that. It was just real basic. Here's how you animate, and here's your time frame, and your layers, and your keyframes, and all that kind of stuff.
I'm actually
So
looking up Deluxe Paint right now, and it totally looks familiar to me. So,
yeah,
but yeah,
it's
you're right. You're
amazing.
right. Yeah.
It's amazing, like what you can do, and it definitely was tricky to use, but I was, man, Internet Archive is your best friend if you like this kind of stuff. It's like I spent hours just because on Internet Archive you can they what is they use what's the ROMs where they make ROMs for emulators. They use emulators for so you can play those actual like ROMs on Internet Archive.
Oh my
So like Kid
goodness.
Kicks is on there and all that, which is awesome.
Oh wow. I'm gonna have to go
So there
check
was a way
that
for
out.
me to like research this stuff and kind of test it without having a Commodore 64.
Yeah. So you like grew up with all these fun, very easy to use, kind of instant gratification animation apps. And now after you've been in animation for a while and the pandemic hits and you're looking for something similar, you're not finding anything that currently exists like for today's kind of generation type of deal. So then you contact John. John
Yeah.
says yes. And then you make an app together?
Yeah, it basically starts off there. The fundamental of it was okay, let's just make something that you can record your stroke. That was like the first thing. Like, and he did it in like a night. He's like that fast and that good. And he sent it over, and I was like, oh my God, like you've already created like what I thought would have been the hardest feature in the whole app.
Yeah,
And and then from there it was like, okay, well, we kept talking. We talk weekly just to keep pushing it, keep updating it, and keep talking about future things we're going to make for it. And I think from there it was like a lot of testing on how the he's so much better at communicating this knowledge, like the CPU can handle versus like
right.
um, the performance issues. So there was early on there was a lot of busty, laggy stuff, and he would figure out later on like ways to code that would save that GPU information.
Totally. Do you mind if I ask maybe like a business related question? Because I'm curious of how you guys came to an agreement when you're essentially two different strangers and decide to
Yeah.
make something together. And now you have an app that can be bought. Did you sign something up front saying like, you know, portions of revenue, or are you paying him, or et cetera? Like, did you have to sign all that fun stuff up front?
Yeah, not necessarily up front. It was more of a handshake, and then we started a business together. So
Hmm.
we're 50-50 partners in it.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, that was really the solidifying deal, was just start a business together. And that way it feels like, we're in it together, and it's a great relationship. I'm really lucky to find him because um I really didn't want him to feel like he was just executing my idea. And
Yeah.
the way his brain works, for instance, like the first big discovery that I would have never thought was he made a thing called a D-pad, and it's under effects, it's above effects, and it's just a little square. And essentially what that does is it records your stroke, so you can make a little stroke, and it uses nodes. So when you actually draw, so if you recorded a circle in that little square and you draw, it's gonna make your animations do circles as you're
Oh,
drawing. So you can create crazy patterns. And that was like his brain. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, and I kept saying, we're not losing that feature. And I think he was like, oh, maybe that could go away. I was like, no, that's like one of the coolest things, man. Like, once people figure out how to use stuff like that, I think that will open their
yeah.
minds to
Because
trying
one of
different.
the things I noticed was how interesting some of the patterns you can create are. And, I think that's great. I'm wondering, okay, so why did you decide to make this app after being an animation director by day, doing crazy cool, funky, experimental music videos kind of on the side? What made you say, I want to take on a new project and it's going to be this app?
Man, I don't know. I when I was playing when I first started using other software in ways to perform, because I was kind of just noodling around on Instagram Live and doing like fun live animations to music. It
Yeah,
just got me inspired to like I've always wanted to make things. That's kind of like I just like making things, and I think I get bored with things really quickly, and that was so new to me, and it was so foreign to think that maybe you should create an app, and it didn't like not knowing how to write an app. It didn't stop me from hunting it down. It took a long time, and I would like take a break and then
yeah.
go searching again. But I think it was just this like I kept thinking, how cool would it be to make something that I enjoy using, because I was using apps in ways that weren't meant to be used that way.
Hmm.
Um, and I think just because I got frustrated and I just kept wanting that for myself. So, and at the end of the day, that's really what like John and I talk about is like, you know, as frustrating as things can be sometimes with like learning an app, like anybody that downloads something, I think people want to learn stuff really easy. They don't want to spend the time to learn it. And even to me, PX12 is a simple app to use, but you might have to spend a little bit more time understanding it. I'm getting off a tangent here. Sorry.
That's okay.
Um,
I was just interested because it's your journey to make this app is already quite long. You put in a lot of effort. You're working with somebody else. I was trying to get behind what is the driving force that's pushing you to
yeah,
do this, even when you're working a full-time job and doing really cool things in animation.
yeah. It's really just because I love, I love the idea that it was like it wasn't there and now it is, and it's like a reality, and it motivates me to keep trying to improve on it.
Totally, totally.
Honestly, to answer your question, I wanted something for myself to use, and it was like, oh cool, we got it, it's done. And now it's like, how do you make it even better than what you originally had, or what are the new ideas that you never thought of? um so yeah, forgot what I was saying about the app, but anyways, I'll come back to it.
We'll talk more about it, I guess. I'm wondering, we've talked a lot about this app. Can you just give an overview, kind of a snapshot of what it is for people who are wondering or interested and maybe want to use it? Like what sales pitch this app right now, I guess.
Okay, yeah, okay. It's PX12 is a pixel-based animation sequencer. It's a sequencer because it's 12 frames, like a music synthesizer or sequencer. It doesn't act like your traditional frames per second. When you speed it up or slow it down, it's always going to play 12 frames. So don't think of it as like, I'm going to put it at 60 frames a second or 30 frames a second, because technically it's just playing those 12 frames even faster or slower, and it's just fitting them in that time frame. So it's a little different like that. It is always running. So when you open the app, when you're using it, think of it as it's like an engine that's running. You can tell it to stop, but it's really just moving. So you can create pretty wild, simple things. Patterns are like the easiest thing to create. It's probably what I use it the most for, is abstract animations, to just push it and see how cool you can make something really fast. I When we originally, like, really at its core, we wanted an app that could be kind of used as an additive for VJs, somebody that would plug it into their performance and have it on their iPad and use it for their mixer. But it became so much more than that. It became kind of like an educational tool, because people that don't know how to animate can use it. and it saves all of your frames in your iCloud folder. So you can pull those frames out and do post-production on stuff. You can record the screen if you want. A lot of times is I'll play music and just sync my animation to the music. And it allows you, I look at it as like an instrument, because really on the iPad, I'm a lefty. So I'll draw with my left hand, and then I'll use my right hand to maneuver the color wheel, and it's changing all in real time. So if I want the screen to rotate or zoom, it's all happening simultaneously. And that's the really unique part of PX12, is it's all just real time. And once you wrap your head around that, it becomes like a really fun instrument to use.
Totally. Yeah. I like that. I like how you said it's kind of an engine because it's always running, it's already like looping through. You just put your pen down on the screen and already wherever you draw just turns into this wild looping pattern thing. It's
Yeah.
it's kind of like, I don't know if you remember like the old days of like Winamp, when there would be like you'd turn on like the music screen thing for Winamp, and it would like
Yeah.
play psychedelic
Yes.
patterns to your music. That's kind of
Yes.
what like this is, but you're like drawing the psychedelic patterns yourself. And the other thing
Yes.
is like, I don't think anybody needs to know how to animate. There's like no learning curve there. You could just start and it's like instantly playing for you. So who is, you mentioned VJs, people, it's kind of like an instrument. Who is like the perfect person for this? Like who are you hoping really gets stuff out of this? Because like my immediate thought was like, oh, you can use this for like music videos, for instance, or like
Yeah.
crazy psychedelic backgrounds for a sequence of somebody on drugs, I guess.
Yeah, I think anybody, I know that's a vague answer, but ultimately I think the experimental type of person that likes to kind of play with software,
Mm.
because it's not it, it's a bizarro app. It's not your traditional animation app that has the real basic stuff, your time frame, your keyframe, timeline, keyframe, brushes. It's like onion skin. You can make simple animation like that. You can select the keyframe or the timeline or the sequence number and do frame by frame that way if you want. But there's a bazillion other apps that do that.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it really is like, hopefully I want anybody to use it, because I think it's not really, I just love seeing people make stuff with it. And most stuff I've seen are video heads, VJs
Okay.
and stuff that they can manipulate and use it in their gear. I've seen other traditional animators make stuff with it, which is really great.
Well, you say anybody, but like, I don't know, your grandma, like a baby.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like I say, like anybody with the mindset of like kid to
Yeah.
adult,
Right,
it
right.
not, I have friends that have bought the app for their kids, and that's really cool. And I think they like that because it's really fun just seeing like you draw and it record your stroke and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, and that gives them excitement to keep playing with it. Um, what else?
Could you see you go to like an indie music concert and then there's like the DJ and then like the guy beside him with your app and like the pen and like, you know, drawing stuff to what's going on? Does that make sense? Would that
I
be
mean,
pretty cool?
that's a goal, right? Like that's a goal. I did have some breakthroughs recently where I think the thing we were struggling with early on was, how do you get the image out of the iPad to a projector, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's easy to like plug your HDMI cable into the projector, and that dongle goes into the iPad, right? But the tricky part was like, well, you still have the menu option, right? How do you get rid of the menu option where it's just your screen? And you'd have to go to a third party where it's a laptop using OBS or whatever.
Uh,
And the breakthrough was like, oh, using actual VJ software. That really adds a lot more complexity to your visual, and you can really do crazy stuff with that because you crop in and it's already kind of there, and you can sync up your music to the PX12 image or any additive stuff you bring into the VJ software. And I know that that kind of, when you, that gets out of like the traditional animation person, because most animators I know aren't really dabbling in VJ stuff.
Right. They're
Um,
super introverts, don't want to be seen or heard.
yeah, they're not. I mean, there are some, but it's not, you don't really see that often, you know. And so you know, they're probably, my guess is that your traditional animator that's opening up PX12 probably would be frustrated with it because it's so different. It's not the traditional
Right. Right.
setup like those other apps that are out there.
Got you, got you.
Yeah.
So what are you doing to kind of like, get the word out about this, especially if you want to get into the VJ scene? Like, are you, you've got this app in App Store. Like, how
Yeah.
do you market something like this?
Yeah, I'm I don't know. I'm I'm like trying to figure that out as I'm doing it. I think that was a big like um a big shock when we finished the app. I mean, we worked on it for a solid year, and
Yeah.
it came out in December of last year. And then it was like I made the mistake of not putting out tutorials right away. And it
Hmm.
came out, people were like, and in my head, it was like, I've been on it for so long. It was like, and no, it's so easy to understand.
Yeah,
And
you're
you,
like Richard Williams. Like, how come you don't understand
yeah, right.
animation?
Yeah,
My
right.
level.
Get out of here. But no, like I had like, to me, it was like, oh, you have your screen, your timeline, and the folders for things. It was like so self-explanatory, but really it tripped people up. And I think a lot of it was simple things like the app running, like the engine is going. So when they would draw, they would think like, why am I'm just trying to draw one drawing,
Right.
but it
Why
won't
is it
let me.
disappearing and playing?
Yeah,
And
and like, why can't I stop this from happening? And like simple things like that was like a huge like, oh no, like I gotta get tutorials out quick.
yeah.
um and I know it'll come over time and continue to make that stuff, but it's really hard because it's a world I don't know anything about the app world. It's not like I'm like going out and downloading all these apps. I just wanted to make something. John and I want to make something for us, so
Right.
we thought, oh, this will be cool, let's put it out. And I think the thing is reaching out to other artists, trying to get them excited about it, or seeing if they would want to use it for one of their jobs. And it's continuing just to make things for it, and telling people how to use it. And I think that's the key, or the what I'm trying to focus on now is just to keep pushing it, make stuff for it. Social media is a huge thing. I can't figure out TikTok. I'm trying that, but it's a tough platform
Right.
for this. But yeah, I'll keep trying.
So you mentioned a couple times your goal was originally just to make something for yourself, but now that it's on the App Store and like et cetera, have you changed that goal? Like, are you trying to get like, I don't know, 1 million downloads, or
Yeah.
make a profit, or just like get on a couple of cool music videos, or like, how does that goal change now that it's out in the public?
Um, that's a good question. Yeah, the goal is to keep making it to where it's providing unique and fun ways to make art and animation. We're working on, I'll give you an example, working on an update now that we're doing a video brush for it. So you could paint with video. And that's not a common thing you see in any app, right? And it's really cool how
What do you mean paint with video?
painting with video, yeah. So you can fast forward or rewind as you're painting. So you bring in
Oh,
podcast video and you wanted to paint um paint it, and as you're painting it's actually playing the video. So it's a really cool feature, and could open up a lot of unique ways to make art with it. Um, so we're just trying to figure out ways that are still pushing it and doing unique things with it,
Hmm.
things that excite us versus just trying to, I mean, we're obviously trying to add the things that fans and people want through just feedback. Some things aren't really possible because of the nature of the app. Like, for instance, we have an undo in the app, but if you think about it, undo is actually a really tricky thing because you're undoing it. You're undoing 12 states at once. So because you're drawing on all, like, it's a really tricky thing. So it gets a little weird sometimes. The math of it all gets a little bizarre as you're doing that. So sometimes it would undo, or it might undo something you don't want because you're doing it 12 times. So,
Yeah, certainly unique problems. And I'm guessing space is always an issue too. Like my Photoshop is like, oh, I want 4 gigs of cache just for this one image of undos, and you're working in like a little app that's on your phone.
yeah, it's that. I don't, the goal obviously is, of course, yeah, we would love to sell like 1 million units or whatever, of course, but the reality of that is like so slim. I mean, it's like, I
Right.
mean, you're just in a sea, like a sea of apps that are out there. And um if I can just get people excited about it and want to use it and post it, that's a goal. It's like, oh, awesome, like somebody posted it and tagged us or whatever. And that to me is just enough, honestly. It's like, to get this far that we did this is like the most exciting thing for me. Honestly, it's like probably the coolest thing I've ever done. Like,
Wow.
and I didn't even code the thing. So like, it's just so cool, like to collaborate with somebody and build something that's really unique is so satisfying.
I mean, I love that. It sounds like you found a really cool passion project. I was wondering, say tomorrow you're like, you know what, PX12 it's reached its final update, it's complete. It's a thing that exists forever as is. Would you make another app? Would you consider, or like, becoming some kind of app guy?
Yeah.
Or is this kind of like a one-turn project?
Yeah, I absolutely. I remember when John sent me one of the first versions of it around the beginning. I was already like, I've got our next app idea. Like, and he was like, okay,
He's
settle
like, slow
down, like,
down.
slow down, man.
For
Like,
one day in.
he knows how impatient I am, and it's but yeah, definitely, I think about it a lot and how fun it is to do stuff like this. I mean, obviously want it to pay for itself, where
Yeah.
it's, we're not spending our own money to do that. I mean, obviously to get off the ground you have to, but the goal would be like, oh, if we don't have to front all this stuff to do this, then why not? But I think to to try to get PX12 in a place that we're both really happy and that you can't move forward with it much more because of its limitations. Then I start thinking about, like, okay, what's next? I have some ideas that we've kind of loosely talked about, like next versions or next things, because we started a company together, and like I wouldn't want to let this be the thing that just ends that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Um, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And keep a good thing going and keep the ball rolling, et cetera, et cetera. You've already got more ideas. I'm wondering, you have an illustrious career in actual animation versus this app. Have you brought any of things that you've learned from, being an animation director, et cetera, into this app? Because to me, it seems like a very playful, like rudimentary type of, I'm not trying to say that's a bad thing, but like,
Yeah.
you're not doing, performance animation, or you've got like only 12 frames, et cetera. Have you brought anything into this from your professional experience, or have you taken anything from this app into your professional experience?
Yes, I have. Um, so early on, before the app stuff kind of started to come to light, I started dabbling in like video modular synthesizer stuff.
Oh.
And that was a huge inspirational moment for me. I have a friend that told me about it, and then I just got obsessed with just buying the stuff, collecting the stuff. It's a very expensive hobby, but
Yeah.
it was one that allowed me to like think about things differently and get away from the computer
Hmm.
and think about things more tactically and that were happening live. And I think that live aspect of it, like when you turn a knob on a video, like the video synthesis, the basis of it's just waveforms, right? It's just scanning a television tube from left corner to the right corner, right, left top, bottom right. And it's just waveforms that are interlocking, intertwining, creating beautiful patterns. But it was all analog. And the aspect of like turning a knob and seeing like a sine wave kind of shape itself, interact with another sine wave, creating a weird shape was fascinating to me. And it was just, I'd never seen anything like that, using all like Adobe software or computer software. It was just such a fun thing where I was like, God, I could really mess this up. And I love the way it looks now, but if I turn it on just a little bit, it's done forever. Like I'll never be able to replicate that because it was live. And I think that thought of that translated to PX12 because it was happening live. It was just like, how do you get your brain to think about creating fun animations that would normally be really hard or
Yeah.
time consuming? Um, and that was what's really fun is that for the first like working iteration of PX12 to this, I think for a solid year, every time I played with it, I was coming up with a new technique. And that to me just blew my mind because usually I usually work in apps and I use them in ways that they weren't really meant to be used. I like breaking apps basically. I like using things like,
He breaks other people's apps. He builds his own.
yeah, I like using like I like pushing its limit or finding that one thing in an app that isn't really meant to do this, but it works for me. And usually I'll hit a wall eventually and then I'll come back to it and be inspired and find another avenue, right? But with PX12, it was a constant thing where I kept telling John, I was like, I'm finding this new thing. If I just, play with this effect on and then I do something else and stopping the sequence and using the D-pad and like all this stuff. And it was really cool. So there was Longs, man, I really dragged that out. Sorry about
No,
that.
I've loved hearing you talk about this. It's very interesting because animation traditionally has been this like work for a year, labor intensive thing, and then come out with a
Yeah.
2 minute or whatever
Yeah.
episode movie that lasts an hour. But you're talking about a totally different type of animation, which is like live tweaking performance art, which is really cool. And there are like, as you were talking, I was thinking of other examples of things that I've seen. Like, there's a couple of websites where you can just take a character who's already doing a walk cycle and you can change their weight, you can change the skip, the
Yes.
step, the length. And it's like really
Yeah.
fun to play around with, but like it has no essential utility in like mainstream media. But I really like what how you're relating this to music specifically, which is a lot of where you came from as well, which makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
It's almost like how animation before sound had like the piano player beside
Yeah.
the screen, but now it's
Yeah.
the opposite.
It
It's
is. They a lot of the video heads want MIDI support.
hmm,
I don't know if you're familiar with like MIDI technology, but it's just
no,
like it's big in the audio world where you're just sending a signal in and it's seeing that it's reading the off the signals, so it's in sync, right? And maybe that's a poor example of MIDI, but they wanted that capability in PX12,
huh,
which John and I we're not like I'm not a music heavy person at all, and John isn't either. So it becomes a challenge to figure out how to code something that we don't quite fully understand how it would work. But the weird part is that when you're when you're drawing with music playing in PX12, it's gonna sync up. It's just happening so fast. Eventually it will fall in line and sync up. It doesn't need to be MIDI synced to the exact visual because
Right.
it's moving so much, so fast. You really notice it with like repetitive rhythms, whether it's electronic music, dance music, or whatever. You really notice it falling and sinking in time. So it could be a feature that we do, but it could also be a massive waste of our time. Like, I don't know. I'm not really sure.
I mean, you're getting my I like EDM festivals, and usually the background of whatever DJ is playing is just, random objects that have been like made in Blender or Maya or something, like
Yeah.
falling or like exploding or on loop. But all of it was pre-rendered, obviously. It's not created live, but like just speaking in the pie in the sky, I guess is the expression. But like, imagine what you're creating, but with something as complex as like Unreal Engine, where you're manipulating shapes and objects and characters live to the music. Like that sounds awesome to me. Like I would get just as much enjoyment. Well, if I was at a music festival and I understood that what was on the screen was also being played by some random, not a
Yeah.
random person, but somebody live there too, who was like influencing what they're getting back from the music and the audience. That sounds awesome to me.
Yeah. It's definitely a goal. Like it's one of those things where I've never VJ'd on my own, like with gear without PX12. Done it in my confines of my house, right? But like never
Yeah.
for like a performance. But I can only imagine like how stressful that is when you're performing. You have most of the time the artist is synced to the set list, right? They're just triggering moments
Yeah.
or to heighten this part of the song. Most of it's already pre-planned out. But if it's not, it's super stressful because your brain has to think really fast. Um, and that's kind of the fun part about it too. If you can kind of get past like mistakes happening and just kind of are along for the ride, it's really fun to like figure out ways to do it. And we have in the app, we have a toolbox folder that just saves your brushes. So you can already kind of think of it as like you're pre-programming something.
Huh.
So you can make a brush, save it, and then call them up immediately to start um, drawing to whatever you're listening to.
Cool, cool. Well, next concert I go to, I better see you specifically on stage with your iPad and pen.
I'm gonna the first gig I do, I'll make sure I photo it and send it to you.
Oh, please. Oh my
We did
goodness,
it.
please. I would
Say,
love that.
Terry, we did
But honestly, like
it.
even, I'm in Toronto, there's artists playing at small little like bars that have like 20 people in them. And they've
Yeah,
got like a little screen and a little table set up at the back. There's tons of people who are doing this already, just like randomly.
yeah, it is. It's a huge, huge thing. And to kind of go back to using PX12, the original question was like taking have I taken PX12 out of the iPad to use to the work, and
Yeah.
is yeah, absolutely. I try to actually think about jobs now, like how can I use this? I could do this so much easier on PX12 that I can output to that to put into this job or whatever, and I
Right.
I do, yeah, and will continue to.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that makes total sense because there's so many times where you just need a random kind of looping crazy background for something. And then like the anxiety of like, I have to create this in After Effects or something else. And like
Yeah.
versus just a tool that kind of does it. That was the immediate application that I saw when I saw
Oh, you did.
PX12. I haven't done it myself, but that was just the first thing that came to mind. I was like, next time I need some random crazy
Yeah.
background, I'm just gonna go here and make it with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, cool. Well,
Yeah.
I feel like we've chatted at length about PX12. Is there anything we didn't hit on that you wanted to share?
I don't think so. I mean, I feel like I've been talking my head about it, and hopefully hopefully I've covered
I found it
everything.
really interesting. I'm
Oh,
just
cool.
picking your brain, and you're giving me that. So that's all. That's what this is. It's a podcast
Yeah.
where I ask questions and you answer them, and this
Awesome.
is
I
how
like
it's been
this.
going.
I like this arrangement. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, is there, maybe we could start wrapping up if you feel like you've talked at length, but is there anything else, in your professional career, or anything that you think would be important to share? I know that, you got your start kind of way back in the day with a random studio that took you in, and now you've worked your way up to you're at Warner Brothers now?
Yeah, Warner Brothers Discovery. Yeah, yeah. I wish I had like some like amazing like quote to end on, but that would be different than anybody else. But I don't.
Well, how about this? What at the end of the day keeps you going on this path? Because you have a lot of interests. You have music, which is a huge interest
Yeah.
of yours. You started in graphic design, et cetera, et cetera. What keeps you specifically pursuing animation and working your way up there?
Okay, that's good. That's a good jumping off point. Always staying curious and or being curious and being humble to any approach that I take. I think the hunt for the next thing is what keeps me going.
Yeah.
I may have mentioned one of the downfalls is I get bored easily, and
I
I'm
don't think that's a
always
downfall. I'm the same, and it just leads me to
really.
new and more interesting things.
Yeah, I think that, and it's like, yeah, if I didn't have that, I think I would just kind of tap out and be like, okay, I've hit the
Yeah.
wall. But
Can I,
staying curious is huge for me every
Gotcha.
day.
Can I ask you about the humble comment? Because like I've heard a few people say stay humble, but like what does that actually mean in practice? Like, Adam, here's this great new role, a big new project. How do you approach it humbly when, you know, uh,
Uh,
I don't know, you
yeah,
have all this experience, etc. What does that mean?
I think I kind of put it with like killing the ego, and allowing yourself to want to learn.
Hmm.
You might be surrounded by people that are younger and should never feel like you're above anybody or than anybody, because one of the coolest things that can happen is when the teacher becomes the student. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, did I say that right?
Yes.
No, the student becomes the teacher. I said it backwards. Student becomes the teacher is one of the coolest things that can happen, and it's humbling when that does happen. It's you start to realize you don't know it all,
Yeah.
and it can, I mean, any creative is like this. We get in our head a lot, and just wanting to be to want to learn all the time.
Right. So instead of saying like, I'm the director on this project, I've got it all figured out, like you can give me feedback, but it's going to bounce off me. Coming to this and saying like, I'm the director on this project. I have some things figured out, but I'm open to hearing and learning from everybody else involved in this to like make the best thing,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah, allowing yourself to give up a lot too, like, like
Hmm.
not to take control over everything, and allowing other people to give their input and
Yeah.
hearing that input. I think that's, just being a really good person, a good creative to work with, is
Nice.
it's all wrapped up in one, like um hearing other people's thoughts and ideas.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. Cool. How do you feel about that advice that you just said?
I think it's okay. Yeah,
You
I
think
think
it's
I'm kind
okay?
of, yeah, yeah. I feel good. I feel good
Great.
about that.
Great.
Yeah,
Um, did you have anything else you want to share?
no, I really appreciate you again giving me the time to talk about my app and myself, and hopefully people will go out and try it
Yeah.
and post it and share it with the world.
Yeah, well, I think it's really cool what you're doing, and I love that it's coming from a place of just curiosity and love for wanting to create something that you would use yourself. I think that's really awesome, and I hope that people check out, at least watch a video of some of the things that you can create because it's really really fun.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, Adam, for coming on the chat. And if you're listening and you want to check out Adam's work or PX12, I'm going to include the websites, the Instagram, and YouTube tutorials as well. So please go check them out there in the description of the chat. And that's all for now. So thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye. The music for this podcast was composed by Willem Mendo and the graphics by Luhan Wang. I encourage you to look them up if you've enjoyed their work.